In the bustling city of Ibadan, one name echoed above all others: Adebayo, the master craftsman. His hands shaped wonders that even kings and billionaires coveted, yet his heart swelled with arrogance, blind to the humility that gives true greatness its shine. Pride drove him to humiliate a gentle Elder Ibrahim, in a contest that should have been an honor. But fate has a cruel way of humbling the proud. On a moonless night, Adebayo world shattered. Ambushed, beaten, and cast from a mountain road, he should have died. Instead, he awoke in the quiet arms of Bimbo, a healer's daughter in a forgotten village, with no memory of who he was or the sins he carried. As he healed, love bloomed, yet fragments of his past clawed at him. Visions of contests, betrayal, and enemies who had not forgotten. The village faced its own trials: apprentices losing faith, rivals seeking to claim Bimbo inheritance, and the looming shadow of Chief Thomas, a tyrant with cruel ambitions. Would Adebayo reclaim his past and let pride destroy him again, or embrace humility, protect the woman who saved him, and build a legacy of love that could outlast time itself? What's up, tale lovers? Hit subscribe before we unravel today's story to stay locked in for more journeys. The first time someone called me the greatest craftsman in the city, I laughed. Not because I doubted it, but because I thought it was obvious. At 33, I lived as though the world revolved around my chisels and hammers. My name, Adebayo, carried weight in every market, in every gathering of artists and artisans. Men of influence knew me, women admired me, young men whispered my name with envy, and apprentices prayed just to watch me work. But in truth, I was not merely proud. I was arrogant, dangerously so. My workshop stood on Balagan Street, a busy corner of the city. But when people entered its doors, the chaos of the streets faded away. Inside, sunlight spilled across long wooden tables stacked with carvings, polished sculptures, delicate metal works, and furniture that seemed too fine for mortal hands to have shaped. Visitors often gasped when they entered. Some muttered prayers under their breath, as though they had stepped into a sacred shrine. That was how I liked it. Apprentices would line up at the entrance every morning, some clutching sketches, others with hopeful faces. They begged for a chance to learn under me. I rarely accepted. Sometimes I waved them away without even speaking. To me, apprentices were burdens. Why waste time on teaching when I could be creating? Why share my secrets when the world already bowed to me? And when wealthy clients came, governors, CEOs, the wives of billionaires, they spoke to me with reverence. They called me master, they called me genius. Every praise was like wine. I drank deeply. But in every city, there is always another name whispered in quiet corners. In mine it was Baba Ibrahim. He was old, his hair white, his back slightly bent. His workshop was nothing like mine. Small. Humble. No marble floors, no glass cases, no golden lamps. And yet people loved him. He was called the people's craftsman. He took in every apprentice who came, whether rich or poor, skilled or clumsy. His hands were steady, his work delicate, his spirit unshakable. And it infuriated me. One evening I overheard two wealthy clients speaking. "Yes, Adebayo is brilliant," one said. "But have you seen Baba Ibrahim work? There's something pure about it." The words seared my pride. How dare they compare me with him? I was the future. He was the past. That night, as I sat in my lavish home surrounded by my own creations, a thought poisoned my mind. To be the best in the city is not enough. I must be the best in the country, the world. And Baba Ibrahim is in my way. I did not wait long. The next day I walked into his workshop, unannounced. The place smelled of sawdust, oil, and burning coal. The sound of hammers striking echoed faintly in the back. 3 young apprentices worked under his watchful gaze. They looked up in surprise as I entered, clad in my fine clothes, polished shoes clicking against the wooden floor. "Oga Adebayo," one of them stammered. "What an honor." "Save your honor," I snapped. My eyes locked on Baba Ibrahim. He was seated at a small table, carving a simple wooden bowl. When he saw me, he did not rise. He only looked at me, his face calm, his eyes kind. "I've come to challenge you," I declared. The apprentices froze. Baba Ibrahim set down his tool gently, brushing wood shavings from his lap. "What kind of challenge, my son?" "My son." The word stung me. "A test of skill," I said sharply. "You and I. Let the city see who the true master is." He sighed, his shoulders rising and falling slowly. "Adebayo, a master is not proven by competition. A true master is known by how he lifts others, not by how he defeats them." "Spare me your riddles, old man," I spat. "You've hidden behind humility for too long. I will expose you." The apprentices exchanged worried glances. Baba Ibrahim's lips curved into a faint, almost sorrowful smile. "If that is your desire," he said softly, "then let it be." The challenge was announced, and within hours the city buzzed with excitement. By the next day a crowd filled the town square. On one side I stood, my tools gleaming under the sun. On the other Baba Ibrahim, simple and calm, his apprentices gathered nervously behind him. The task: to carve a masterpiece from the same block of wood within a set time. I attacked my work with fury. My chisel struck fast, my hands moved with speed that drew gasps. The shape emerged quickly, a figure of power and grandeur, every line bold, every curve commanding. The crowd cheered. Baba Ibrahim moved slowly, carefully. His strokes were deliberate, his hands steady as though each cut carried a prayer. Hours passed and his work was not yet done. Some in the crowd grew restless. I smirked, carving faster, louder. Let them see my brilliance. Let them worship me. When the final hour came, my sculpture towered proudly, a warrior, fierce and majestic. The people clapped, shouted my name. Then Baba Ibrahim stepped forward, unveiling his piece, a simple mother cradling her child. The detail was breathtaking, the tenderness almost alive. The crowd fell silent, moved not by grandeur but by the quiet beauty before them. For the first time my pride trembled. I could not accept it. In anger I shoved past him, my elbow striking his hand. A crack echoed, the breaking of his little finger. He winced but did not cry out. Gasps filled the square. I raised my arms in triumph, forcing a smile. Behold, the true master. But the cheers were faint. The silence was louder. Baba Ibrahim cradled his broken finger and whispered words that pierced deeper than any blade. "Pride breaks more than bones, my son." I walked away that evening claiming victory, but inside, unease gnawed at me. People whispered differently now. Some still praised me but others shook their heads. It didn't matter, I told myself. I was still the greatest. I had defeated him. That night as I drove home in my sleek black car, the city lights flashing by, the road seemed strangely empty. Then it came, sudden, brutal. A massive truck roared from the shadows, slamming into me with terrifying force. My car spun, flipped, metal screaming, glass exploding. I crashed against the railing of the mountain road. Dazed, bleeding, I tried to crawl out. But a figure approached through the smoke. Mr. Thomas. He was tall, broad, with eyes as cold as steel. His suit was immaculate despite the chaos, his shoes polished as though he had stepped from a banquet. He dragged me from the wreck, his grip iron on my collar. "You thought you were untouchable," he hissed, his voice like gravel. "But you humiliated my allies, disrupted my plans. You should have stayed in your place." His fist struck again and again, each blow darker than the last. My face was wet with blood, my ribs cracked, my breath shallow. When I could no longer stand, he hurled me against the edge of the mountain. "Tonight you vanish," he growled. And then he pushed. The world became a blur of rocks and darkness as my body tumbled down, crashing, breaking, until everything faded into silence. When I opened my eyes, I was no longer on the mountain. I lay on a small bed in a dimly lit room. Herbs hung from the ceiling. The air smelled of firewood and medicine. My body ached, every inch screaming in pain. But worst of all, my mind was blank. I did not know my name. I did not know where I was. A soft voice broke through the fog. "You're awake." I turned my head. A woman sat beside me, her face illuminated by the flickering light of a lantern. She was beautiful, not in the shallow way of painted faces and jewels, but in the depth of her eyes. They were strong yet filled with compassion. "My name is Bimbo," she said gently. "You were broken when I found you. But you're safe now." Safe. The word felt foreign, as though it belonged to another life. I tried to speak, but only a whisper came, "Who am I?" Her expression softened with pity. She touched my arm lightly. "Rest," she said. "Your name will come back when it's meant to. For now, all you need to know is, you are not alone." And in that moment, for the first time in years, I felt something greater than pride. I felt mercy. When a man forgets his name, he also forgets his pride. And for the first time since I could remember, though I remembered nothing, I felt the strange freedom of not being the greatest, not being admired, not being anyone at all. All I had was pain, questions, and the face of the woman who saved me. The days after I awoke were a blur of weakness and silence. I lay in the little room, staring at the cracked ceiling, listening to the creak of wooden floors and the occasional murmur of voices outside the door. Sometimes the voices belonged to children, giggling in the distance. Sometimes they belonged to an older man, his tone steady and patient. But most often I heard her voice, Bimbo. She moved like a quiet storm, calm on the surface yet filled with energy beneath. Her footsteps never dragged. Her hands were always busy, washing, cooking, tending to me. When she entered the room, the air shifted and I felt both smaller and safer. "You need to eat," she would say, spooning broth to my lips. "You need to rest," she whispered when I tried to sit up. "You need to stop frowning," she teased one morning when she caught me scowling at my bandaged hands. Her presence was steady, like the earth beneath my feet. But her eyes, dark, intense, held stories she never spoke of. I tried in those early days to remember who I was. At night, when pain eased into restless dreams, I saw flashes, splinters of a life that seemed both familiar and foreign. A chisel biting into wood. A crowd cheering. The sound of laughter that was not kind. The gleam of a black car under city lights. And a man, towering, merciless, his fists raining down. I would wake drenched in sweat, gasping, clutching my head as pain sliced through my skull. Bimbo would sit beside me, her hand pressing gently to my chest. "It's all right," she would whisper. "You're safe. Whatever it is, it can't hurt you here." Her words were soothing, but the emptiness inside me was terrifying. I didn't know if I was a good man or a bad one, if I had left behind a family or enemies, if I had been loved or hated. Sometimes I wondered if perhaps I had died and been given another life. It was not long before I met the rest of the family. The older man whose voice I had heard was Papa David, Bimbo's father. He was frail when I first saw him, his skin loose around his bones, his breath shallow. But his eyes still carried the sharpness of a craftsman, and when he looked at me, I felt as though he could see beyond flesh into spirit. "You are lucky," he told me one evening, his voice raspy but clear. "The mountain does not often return those it swallows." I bowed my head, though shame prickled in my chest. I could not even tell him my name. Then there was Stella, Bimbo's younger sister, barely 19, full of fire and questions. She hovered around me constantly, peeking into the room, blurting out things that made her sister scold. "Where are you from? Why do you look so sad? Do you like my sister? She likes you. Stella." Bimbo would snap, her cheeks flushing as she dragged the girl away. Their home was modest, far humbler than the mansion I faintly recalled in dreams. The walls were simple clay and wood. The floor creaked. The kitchen smelled of smoke and herbs. But there was warmth in every corner, a warmth that unsettled me because it felt like something I had never known. It was only weeks after I arrived that sorrow struck. Papa David had been ill for years, they told me, but he had hidden the depth of his suffering. One night, his breathing grew shallow, his body trembling as Bimbo and Stella clutched his hands. I stood helpless in the doorway, my heart pounding, as if some unseen weight pressed against me. "Baba, please," Bimbo whispered, her voice breaking. "Don't leave us." The old man turned his eyes to me, of all people. His lips parted, and though his voice was faint, his words carved deep. "Take care of them." Then he was gone. The wails that followed shook the little house. Bimbo held her sister tightly, her own tears silent but unending. I stood frozen, my chest burning with an ache I could not name. For days, grief wrapped around the household like heavy cloth. The apprentices Papa David had trained began to drift away, muttering that without him, the workshop was finished. The heart of their craft had died with him. Bimbo tried to hold them together, but her strength, though immense, was not enough. And I who could not even recall my own name, felt powerless. One afternoon, chaos erupted. Stella came running to her sister, breathless and trembling. "They're leaving," she cried. "The apprentices, all of them. They said they will not stay here anymore." Bimbo dropped the basket she was carrying. The fruit spilled across the ground, but she didn't notice. Her face went pale. "They can't," she whispered. "Not now." She turned to me, eyes wide with desperation. "Please come with me." We rushed to the workshop. Inside, half-finished pieces lay scattered, wood, tools, dust. The apprentices, 5 young men, stood in a huddle, their faces hard. "We cannot stay," one of them declared when Bimbo begged. "Without your father there is no future here. We must find work elsewhere." Her hands trembled as she reached out. "Please. My father gave everything to this workshop. To you. Don't abandon him now." But they shook their heads. I stepped forward. My voice was rough, uncertain. "Listen. A man does not prove his worth by running when things are hard. Stay. Or together we can rebuild." They turned to me with disdain. "And who are you?" one sneered. "A stranger with no name? Why should we follow you?" The words cut sharper than knives. My hand flew to my temple, the pain of memory flashing suddenly, faces, tools, crowds. My head throbbed so fiercely I staggered. Bimbo rushed to steady me, her hands firm on my shoulders. Are you all right? But through the haze of pain, something stirred within me. Something long buried. I looked at the apprentices, my voice low, trembling with both weakness and anger. Because I know what it means to lose everything. And I will not let this place die. That night I could not sleep. My head pounded, images flickering like broken glass in my mind. A square filled with people. A wooden sculpture, delicate as breath. A hand breaking beneath mine. A voice whispering, "Pride breaks more than bones, my son." I gasped awake, sweat dripping, my heart racing. I pressed my palms against my face, trembling. Who was I? What had I done? Bimbo entered quietly, carrying a small lamp. Her face softened when she saw me. "Another dream?" she asked gently. I nodded, unable to find words. She set the lamp down and sat beside me. For a long time, silence filled the room. Then she spoke, her voice calm but heavy. "Whoever you were," she said, "it doesn't matter here. You're alive. You're with us. And that is enough." Her hand brushed mine. Warm. Steady. In that moment, though my mind was chaos, my heart found a strange peace. But peace is never left unchallenged. A week later, word came that a rival group of craftsmen from the neighboring town had heard of Papa David's death. They came swaggering into the square, demanding ownership of the workshop. "This place is ours now," their leader sneered. "The old man is gone. The apprentices are weak. And these women," his eyes lingered cruelly on Bimbo and Stella, "cannot defend what belongs to men." Rage surged through me, though I still did not know my name. I stepped forward. "Leave," I said. The man laughed. "And if we don't? What will you do, stranger?" Without thinking, I picked up a chisel. My hand moved with instinct, faster than thought. I carved into the wood beside me, deep, precise cuts, sharp angles flowing into delicate curves. The rival craftsman fell silent, watching as a shape emerged under my hands in mere moments. A hawk, wings outstretched, its feathers so detailed it seemed ready to take flight. When I finished, I dropped the chisel. My chest heaved, sweat dripping down my brow. "This is what I will do," I said. The apprentices stared at me, their eyes wide with shock. The rivals muttered, backing away, unsettled. And in that moment, I knew two things. I had been a craftsman. And my hand still remembered, even if my mind did not. The chisel sang against the wood. The sound was sharp, alive, like a whisper only I could hear. Each stroke carved not just shape but memory, as if the wood itself were a mirror pulling pieces of me from the void. A hawk feathers. A warrior's mask. A mother's hand. A boy's laughter cut short by a scream. My chest tightened as the images blurred. I dropped the chisel before my trembling hands betrayed me. Bimbo, standing nearby, caught the fear in my eyes. "Another vision?" she asked quietly. I nodded, unable to speak. She touched my arm gently, her voice firm but tender. "Don't let the past steal you. Not when we need you here." "Need me?" The word struck deeper than she knew. Word of my carving had spread quickly. The apprentices whispered about it as if it were a miracle, a sign that Papa David workshop still had life. But miracles have a way of drawing envy. 1 week later, the rivals returned. They came at dawn, their footsteps pounding like a war drum as they stormed into the workshop. The leader, a broad-shouldered man with scars, sneered at the sight of us. "So the nameless cripple can hold a chisel," he mocked. "Impressive. But skill doesn't give you ownership." Bimbo stepped forward, her chin lifted with quiet defiance. "This workshop belongs to my family. You have no claim here." The man's eyes glinted with cruelty. "A woman's words mean nothing in matters of craft. And those apprentices," he gestured toward the trembling young men, "are hardly men at all. Without a master you're nothing." Rage boiled in me. My fists clenched until my bandaged knuckles ached. "Then I'll be their master," I said. The room went silent. Even I was startled by my own voice, steady and commanding. The rival leader laughed harshly. "You? A broken man who doesn't even know his own name?" "I know enough," I growled, stepping closer, "to break anyone who threatens them again." The man's eyes narrowed, but he did not strike. "Not yet." Instead he spat on the ground. "Enjoy your little victory. When we return we won't come with words. We'll come with fire." And with that they left. But their promise hung in the air like smoke that would never clear. That night, sleep betrayed me again. The dreams came violent, jagged. I saw myself younger, standing in a crowded square, tools in my hand. People chanted my name, though I could not hear it, only feel the rhythm of it pounding in my blood. I was a master, a man feared and admired. But then the cheers turned to screams. Wood shattered. Blood spilled. A boy cried out, "My brother? My son?" before vanishing into shadow. I woke gasping, clutching my head, the pain so intense I nearly screamed. Bimbo rushed in, her lamp casting golden light across my shaking form. "Adebayo," she whispered, calling me the name they had given me. "What did you see?" I could not answer. My throat locked, my chest heaved. She pressed her hand to my cheek, her eyes fierce with compassion. "You don't have to carry it alone. Whatever you were, whoever you were, you are here now. With us. That is enough." Her words steadied me, but deep inside, a voice whispered otherwise. "No, it is not enough. Because the past was not finished with me." In the days that followed, tension grew. The apprentices worked, but uneasily, their loyalty divided. Some admired the way I carved, as if instinct flowed through my hands. Others distrusted me, whispering when they thought I could not hear. "He doesn't even know who he is. What if he brings danger here?" Maybe the rivals are right. One afternoon, as I guided a trembling apprentice through the delicate curve of a mask, I overheard two of them arguing. "You saw what he did," one insisted. "No one carves like that unless he's been trained by the best. Or unless he stole it," the other muttered darkly. "What if he was an enemy once? What if he's cursed?" The words stabbed me. A part of me feared they were right. When they noticed me watching, they fell silent, shame flickering in their eyes. But the doubt remained. I turned away, my chest heavy. Even here, where I had been given a second chance, I could not escape the shadows of who I had been. That night, Bimbo found me sitting outside, staring into the fire pit. The flames licked at the darkness, sparks rising into the night like lost souls. "You're carrying something heavy," she said softly, settling beside me. I stared into the flames. I don't know who I was. But I fear. I fear I was not a good man. She tilted her head. "Why?" "Because when I dream," I whispered, "I see blood. I see fear. I see my hands, destroying as much as they create." Her silence stretched, and for a moment, I feared she would draw away. But instead she reached for my hand. "Then maybe," she said gently, "this is your chance to be better. To be the man you wish you were, not the man you fear you were." Her words struck deep, like water quenching fire. And though I did not speak it, I felt something I had never known before, the faint stirrings of hope. Hope, however, is fragile. It was 3 nights later when the rivals returned, not with words but with flames. We woke to Stella's scream, the scent of smoke choking the air. The workshop was ablaze, fire roaring through wood and clay, devouring everything Papa David had built. The apprentices scrambled in panic, their shouts mixing with the crackle of flames. Bimbo rushed to save what she could, her hands blistering as she dragged tools and half-finished carvings from the inferno. And I, without thought, I charged into the flames. The heat seared my skin, the smoke clawed at my lungs. But my body remembered. My arms moved with strength I didn't know I still had, hauling beams, dragging apprentices, shielding Bimbo from falling sparks. The rivals stood in the distance, their faces twisted in cruel satisfaction. Something inside me snapped. I seized a charred plank and hurled it at their feet, the fire exploding in sparks. My voice roared across the night, deep and furious. "You want war? Then you've found it." The rivals hesitated, unsettled by the ferocity in my eyes, before retreating into the darkness. But the damage was done. The workshop lay in ruins, half-burned and broken. Bimbo sank to her knees, tears streaking her soot-stained cheeks. "It's gone," she whispered. "All of it." I stood trembling, ash coating my skin, rage and grief tearing through me. And in that moment, memory struck like lightning. I saw myself standing over another fire, years ago. Crowds screaming. Flames consuming wood and flesh alike. My hands bloodied, my eyes wild. I had been strong, admired, feared. But my pride had destroyed everything I touched. The vision seared through me, leaving me gasping, shaking as I fell to my knees beside Bimbo. Her hands gripped mine, her eyes searching. "What is it? What did you see?" I could not tell her. Not yet. Because deep down I knew the truth was not just painful. It was dangerous. The ashes of the workshop still lingered in the air. Days later, the town smelled of smoke and sorrow. Apprentices carried blackened timbers out one by one, their faces hollow with grief. Papa David legacy, gone. Bimbo moved like a woman carrying 3 worlds on her shoulders. She worked from dawn until the stars came out, binding together what little could be salvaged. Yet even in her silence, I felt her despair. Every time I looked at her soot-streaked face, I wanted to promise her that everything would be all right. But I couldn't. Because I wasn't sure if I was the cure to this town's sickness, or the disease that brought it here. Rumors spread quickly in a small town. At the market, women selling cassava whispered about the fire. Men grinding pepper shook their heads. It wasn't an accident. No, rivals. They want the girl's land. But who is the stranger living with them? They say he carved a mask with one stroke of his hand. Maybe he is cursed. The stares followed me everywhere. I felt their judgment cling to my skin like dust. Even as I walked beside Bimbo, carrying her basket of vegetables, I could hear the whispers sharpen. One voice, louder than the rest, called out from a stall, "Hey, nameless man! Are you here to save us or doom us?" Heat flared in my chest, the same rage that once made me feared. My fists curled, ready to silence the voice, when Bimbo's hand brushed mine. "Don't," she whispered firmly. "They only speak what fear teaches them. We cannot fight fear with fists." Her calm steadied me. But deep down, I knew fists were the only language my old world understood. It was on a rain-soaked evening, when thunder rolled over the hills, that the stranger came. The apprentices were huddled inside the ruined workshop, debating whether to leave the town altogether, when the door creaked open. He stepped in slowly, leaning on a carved walking stick. His robe was worn, patched in places, yet his posture was regal. His eyes, sharp, unyielding, fixed on me the moment he entered. "Adebayo," he said. Not a question. A statement. The room froze. Bimbo looked from him to me. You know him?" My heart thundered. The name struck deep, unlocking doors in my mind I wasn't ready to open. Memories surged, faces, challenges, the roar of crowds calling that same name. "Yes," the stranger continued, stepping closer. Rain dripped from his hood, pattering onto the floor. "This is Adebayo, the proud craftsman of Ibadan, the man who challenged his own master, the man who betrayed humility." Gasps rippled among the apprentices. Whispers spread like wildfire. "Ibadan, the city craftsman, the arrogant one." I staggered back, gripping the edge of a broken table. My chest ached, my vision blurred. "No," I muttered. "No, I'm not." But the truth was already spilling, dripping into the cracks of who I'd tried to become. The stranger introduced himself as Elder Ibrahim, once an apprentice to my former rival, the same humble old man whose finger I had broken. His voice trembled with restrained fury as he spoke. "I swore I would find you," he said, his eyes blazing. "After you humiliated our master. After you vanished into shadow. I thought you dead. But here you are, hiding behind innocent people." Bimbo stepped forward, her voice fierce. "He is not hiding. He was hurt, broken, left to die. If he has done wrong before, he is paying for it now." Elder Ibrahima's gaze softened briefly at her, but when he looked back at me, the steel returned. "The man you protect is not who you think. He is pride. He is ruin." My head pounded. Images collided in my skull, my rival's trembling hand, my own laughter echoing cruelly, the weight of a chisel crashing down harder than it needed to. I sank to my knees, clutching my head. "Stop," I gasped. "I can't." But the memories didn't stop. They poured like a flood. Crowds chanting. Wealthy men bowing for my craft. Me turning my back on them all, claiming myself a god among artisans. The shame choked me until I could hardly breathe. When the storm of memory finally broke, I felt a hand on my shoulder. "Bimbo." Steady, unwavering. "You are not the man he speaks of," she said firmly, her voice cutting through the silence. "Even if you were, you are not now. You are the man who saved us from fire. The man who stood with us when everyone else fled." Her words clung to me like a lifeline. But Elder Ibrahim shook his head. "You don't know the darkness you defend. Men like him don't change. They only destroy again." Bimbo rose to her full height, her eyes like steel. "Then watch him prove you wrong." As if summoned by the tension, the rivals returned that very night. Their torches lit the rain-damp streets, flames hissing as droplets fell. Their leader, the scarred man, grinned when he saw Elder Ibrahim. "So, the city dogs sniff him out too," he mocked. "Good. Saves us the trouble." They charged. Apprentices scattered in fear, but I didn't move. My body, my cursed, prideful body, remembered. I seized a plank, swung it wide, knocking two men aside. My fists struck, my legs moved, each blow precise, like carving wood with a master's hand. But it wasn't craft this time. It was violence. Pure, unrestrained. The scarred leader lunged at me with a blade. Reflex took over. I caught his wrist, twisted hard, and with a snap, his weapon clattered to the ground. My fist slammed into his jaw, sending him sprawling. For a heartbeat, the street was silent. Then the rivals fled, dragging their wounded with them. But the silence they left behind was heavy. Not relief, fear. Because in that moment everyone, apprentices, Bimbo, even Elder Ibrahim, had seen not just a savior. They had seen the man I once was. Later, as the apprentices nursed their bruises, Elder Ibrahim approached me again. "You fight like the man you were," he said. "Prideful, ruthless, dangerous." I met his gaze, breath ragged. "And yet, I protected them. I saved them." He leaned closer, his voice low. "But for how long? Before the same fire you carry inside consumes them too." I had no answer. Because I could feel it, burning in my chest, in my fists, in the wild exhilaration of combat. The pride that once destroyed me was stirring again. And if I wasn't careful, it would destroy them too. The morning air felt heavy, like the sky itself mourned what was to come. The town square had been transformed into an arena. Stalls had been pushed aside, the ground cleared, ropes strung up to mark the boundaries. Crowds gathered, buzzing with cruel anticipation. Men with hungry eyes, women whispering in dread, children perched on shoulders to glimpse the spectacle. At the center of it all stood Bimbo. She was radiant, dressed in white cloth tied firmly around her waist, her head held high. But I could see her hands tremble. She stood like a queen, yet I knew her heart thundered with fear. Across from her, smug and towering, stood Adebayo, the eldest son of Mr. Thomas. Muscles bulging, arrogance dripping from every sneer, he looked at Bimbo not as a woman, but as property he had already claimed. And above them, on a raised platform, sat Mr. Thomas himself. Clad in fine robes, a cruel smile on his lips, he watched as though the entire town were his stage. The rules were simple. If Bimbo won the challenge, her family kept their land and freedom. If she lost, she would become Adebayo's wife, bound in chains of marriage and humiliation. But she did not face this challenge alone. She thought she had tricked me with the sleeping draft the night before. She thought I would wake too late, that I would stay safe. But fate, it seems, had other plans. I staggered into the square, breath still heavy from the drug that had dulled my body. Stella, her eyes red with tears, had led me here. When Bimbo saw me, her lips parted in shock. "Adebayo." But the guards shoved me back, spears barring my way. The crowd roared. Adebayo stepped forward, lifting a heavy staff, its head wrapped in iron. He twirled it effortlessly, smirking at Bimbo as though the outcome were already decided. Bimbo raised her own weapon, a simple wooden staff, lighter, humbler, but steady in her grip. The drumbeat quickened. Then with a cry, Adebayo struck. The clash echoed through the square. Wood against iron. Speed against brute strength. Bimbo ducked, spun, struck back with precision. The apprentices who had followed her here shouted encouragement from the edges. But I could see it, the strain in her arms, the fear in her eyes. Adebayo was stronger. Each blow he landed drove her further back. The crowd laughed, jeered. "Marry him now," they shouted. "She cannot win." My heart hammered. I wanted to leap the ropes, to break every guard in my path. But if I did, the challenge would be declared void and Bimbo would lose everything. So I watched. Every muscle in my body burned with restraint. Adebayo feinted left, then struck right, his staff slamming into Bimbo's ribs. She staggered, gasping, nearly falling to the ground. The crowd erupted in cheers. Mr. Thomas leaned forward, his grin stretching wider. Bimbo fell to one knee, clutching her side. Sweat poured down her face, blood trickled from her lip. Still, she gritted her teeth and forced herself up again. "Stand down," Adebayo barked. "You're already mine. Stop this foolishness." But Bimbo spat blood into the dust. "I belong to no one." The crowd fell momentarily silent. Her defiance rang like a bell. Yet Adebayo's face darkened. With a snarl, he lifted his staff high, ready to deliver a final, crushing blow. And that was when something inside me snapped. I surged forward. The guards thrust their spears, but rage gave me wings. I tore the weapons from their hands, shoving them aside as if they were children. Gasps erupted as I leapt into the arena. "Adebayo!" Bimbo gasped. The crowd roared in outrage. Mr. Thomas shot to his feet. "Stop him," he thundered. But it was too late. I seized a fallen staff, the wood warm in my grip. My body remembered every challenge, every duel, every arrogant victory of my past life. The strength, the speed, the precision, all came flooding back. Adebayo sneered. So the cripple thinks he can fight? I raised my staff, eyes blazing. Not for pride. Not for glory. For her. And then I attacked. The clash shook the square. Staff against staff, blow after blow. Sparks of fury and memory lit the air. Adebayo was strong, but I was faster. I ducked, spun, struck with angles he couldn't anticipate. The crowd's jeers turned to stunned silence. Each strike I landed wasn't just against Adebayo, it was against my old self. Against the arrogance that once consumed me. Finally, with a roar, I struck his staff aside, splintering it in two. My final blow slammed into his chest, sending him crashing to the ground. The square erupted. Half in cheers, half in outrage. Bimbo ran to me, tears streaming. But before she could speak, Mr. Thomas's voice boomed over the chaos. This is no victory. This is rebellion. Soldiers surged forward at Thomas's command, spears gleaming. The apprentices rallied behind me, armed with whatever scraps they could find. The town was on the edge of civil war. Then, Elder Ibrahim stepped forward. His voice, old but commanding. Enough. This man, he pointed at Thomas, has brought nothing but corruption and fear. He poisoned rivals. He burned workshops. He murdered Mr. David, the craftsman of honor. Do you deny it, Thomas? The crowd gasped. Thomas's face twisted in fury. Lies. But voices rose from the crowd, men and women who had suffered under his greed. Testimonies spilled forth. Land stolen, debts manipulated, threats whispered in the dark. The tide shifted. The people's anger turned not on us, but on him. The guards faltered, their loyalty breaking. And in that moment Thomas knew. He was finished. The apprentices, emboldened, seized Thomas's men. The crowd surged forward, demanding justice. By dusk, the tyrant who had ruled through fear for years was dragged in chains to the magistrate's hall. When the verdict was declared, that he be hanged for his crimes, the town erupted in a cry of relief. Justice. At last. That night, under the same stars that once felt so far away, Bimbo and I sat together in silence. Her hand found mine. You saved me, she whispered. I shook my head. No. You saved yourself. I only stood beside you. Her eyes glistened. But you chose to stand. And that makes all the difference. I looked at her then, not just at the woman who had pulled me from death, not just at the daughter of a craftsman, but at the heart that had taught me humility when I deserved none. For the first time I allowed myself to imagine a future. Not of fame, not of pride, but of love. Of teaching. Of building instead of breaking. The square where blood nearly spilled was quiet now, lit only by lanterns. I rose, looking at the apprentices who still lingered nearby. I was once a man consumed by pride, I told them. My voice trembled but grew stronger with each word. I thought skill made me greater than others. I was wrong. True greatness is not in being admired, it is in what you give. From today I give everything I know to you. Together we will rebuild this workshop. Not for me. For all of us. The apprentices bowed their heads. Some even wept. Bimbo's fingers tightened around mine. And in that moment I knew, I had finally defeated my greatest rival. Not Adebayo. Not Thomas. Not even the rivals who burned our home. But myself. The town awoke to a silence unlike any it had known in years. It was not the silence of fear, of hidden threats in the night, or of neighbors watching their tongues under a tyrant's rule. No, this silence was alive, golden, breathing. It was the silence of a people free, of a community finally able to imagine tomorrow without chains. The sun rose slowly over the marketplace, casting light on the scattered ashes of what once was Thomas's dominion. His mansion stood abandoned, the heavy iron gate unguarded, its grandeur reduced to ruin. And at the center of town, where once the square had echoed with jeers and cruelty, families now gathered with laughter, with music, with hope. And within that fragile dawn, I found myself once more at the workshop. The scent of sawdust and oil filled the air, the sound of chisels and planes returned like birds after a long winter. The apprentices bent over their workbenches, their movements sure, their voices bright. But there was one voice among them, clear, commanding, that rose above the rest. Bimbo. She moved among them like light itself, correcting one hand's angle, praising another's careful cut, reminding them that every creation bore not just skill but heart. She wore no crown, no title, yet she led with a strength no king could rival. I stood at the doorway watching. For a long time, I had wondered whether this day would come, whether I would live to see joy return to this town, whether I would stand whole again beside the woman who saved me. And now I was here. It was not a grand wedding. Not like the banquets and feasts of the courts I once knew, where men boasted of their wealth through the weight of gold. No, our wedding was held in the square, the same place where blood and humiliation had once threatened to chain Bimbo's future. Now it was filled with flowers, woven garlands, drums and flutes that sang like the wind. The entire town came. Old men leaned on their sticks, children chased one another through the crowd, women carried baskets of food as offerings. They had seen the battle, they had felt the change, and now they came to witness the sealing of it, not through law or decree but through love. Bimbo walked toward me in a gown of woven white cloth, her steps slow, her head lifted with pride. Her sisters surrounded her, their laughter light, their eyes full of tears. Stella carried a calabash of oil, pouring drops at her feet as a blessing. When she reached me, I could not speak for a long moment. My throat closed. For the first time since my fall, since the night I crawled half-dead to her doorstep, I felt whole. The elder's voice rang out, binding us with prayers of peace, of fruitfulness, of unity. When he asked if we would choose one another forever, Bimbo's eyes met mine. "I chose you the day I carried you from death," she whispered. "Today only makes it known." "And I chose you the day you taught me humility," I said, my voice breaking. "Today only makes it eternal." The cheer that rose shook the sky. They said I had once been a man of arrogance, a man who sought glory above all. But standing there hand in hand with Bimbo, I knew this truth: the only glory worth having was love. Time passed. The workshop grew not only in size but in heart. The apprentices became masters and masters became teachers. Soon, the sound of hammers and saws echoed not just in our yard but across the town, then across neighboring villages. People traveled from afar to see the crafts of our workshop, not only for their beauty but for the honor behind them. We built chairs that sat kings and stools that comforted the poorest farmer. We carved doors that opened into palaces, and toys that filled children with wonder. And every piece bore the mark of humility, the reminder that greatness was never in the hand that carved, but in the spirit that gave. And at the heart of it all was Bimbo. Her name became a song in the mouths of the apprentices, her discipline a legend, her gentleness a balm. She was the daughter who became the mother of an entire generation of makers. As for me, I became a shadow at her side, not in weakness but in choice. I guided when needed, I taught when asked, but I let her light lead. For in her, I had found my redemption. Soon, the sound of children filled our home. First came our son, David Jr., named for her father, the craftsman who had given his life for honor. When he was born, I wept as I held him, for in his tiny hands I saw both the fragility of life and the promise of forever. Then came our daughter Aisha, whose laughter echoed like bells. And later, another son, Adebayo, whose eyes carried the depth of all that had passed before him. Our home was never silent. The nights were filled with cries, the mornings with giggles, the afternoons with questions. And in every sound I found healing. For once, my life had been defined by the roar of crowds, the clash of weapons, the emptiness of pride. Now it was defined by the soft call of Baba, and the small arms that clung to my neck. And Bimbo, she was radiant as a mother. Fierce when our children needed strength, tender when they needed comfort, wise when they needed guidance. Watching her with them, I often thought, this is what I was saved for. Not for thrones or glory. But the past never vanishes entirely. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the apprentices closed their tools, a figure arrived at the edge of town. Cloaked, weary, scarred. It was Muhammad, the stranger whose hand had once dragged me from death in the forest, who had appeared again in the shadows during the chaos with Thomas. This time he came not with warning but with peace. "You have done it," he said simply when I greeted him. "You have built what was broken." I clasped his hand. "Not alone. Never alone." He smiled faintly. "The man I once knew, the one who sought to conquer all, he is gone." "No," I corrected. "He still lives. But I keep him buried. Buried beneath love, beneath humility, beneath the hands that now carve instead of destroy." Muhammad nodded. "Then your redemption is real. And that is rare." He left again at dawn, but not before he bent down to bless my children. And though he vanished into the road, I knew he carried a part of me with him. Years turned to decades. Our workshop became more than a place of craft. It became a school, a sanctuary, a temple of hands and hearts. Children came not only to learn skills but to learn honor, patience, humility. They learned that every piece they made was a prayer, every joint a bond, every carving a story. When elders spoke of our town's revival, they spoke not of battles or tyrants, not of rebellions or trials. They spoke of the day Bimbo stood in the square and defied her chains. They spoke of the man who stood beside her, not as her master but as her partner. And when I grew old, when my hands trembled too much to carve, I would sit beneath the tree in the courtyard, watching my grandchildren chase one another. Sometimes they would ask me, "Baba, were you really the man they say you once were? The proud one, the fighter, the one who nearly lost everything?" And I would smile, though my eyes grew wet. "Yes, I was that man. But I was also the man your mother saved. And it is not who we were that defines us. It is who we choose to be." The day came when my body finally grew weak, when the breath in me grew shallow. Bimbo was beside me, her hair streaked with silver, her eyes still fierce, still soft. She held my hand as she had the day she pulled me from death, as she had the day we bound our lives together, as she had through every storm and every sunrise. "Rest," she whispered. "You have done enough." And as I closed my eyes, I felt no fear. Only gratitude. For I had been a man who once lived for pride. And yet, through her, through love, I had found humility. Through humility I had found redemption. And through redemption, I had found forever.